Okay, I'm going to call the October 1st meeting of the Jericho Planning Commission to order. October, new month, new energy, new town planner. Shaheen, very happy to have you join us this evening for your first planning commission meeting. We are very excited to have you here. A couple of people from the planning commission, actually the ones who met with you are the ones who are not here. So we're all new and you're all new to us, although they shared their enthusiasm for your qualifications and your energy and your experience and what you bring to the table. So thank you very much for deciding to come to Jericho. I'll give you a couple minutes to introduce yourself.
Well, great. Well, thank you. I'm also very excited to be here. I'll just say, in terms of how I work, I am very pragmatic in how I do planning. So I'm looking forward to finding out how things actually work. So, and how we actually implement things so that our planning work leads to tangible results. So that's how I work, and I'm going to be using the town plan very much to define what my work program is. So I'm right now going through all the implementation table, and there are other sort of actions that are in the rest of the document that aren't really called out. So I'm kind of pulling those out to better understand exactly what we all want to be working on. Just so you know what I'm going to be doing for the first month while I'm here. Like I said, I'm going through the town plan, kind of doing that assessment. I do want to check in with each of the planning commissioners one-on-one. So please be on the lookout for an email from me. I'd like to set up a time, maybe an hour, just to get to know you a little better, why you're on the planning commission, what you care most about, just some standard questions. I'm also going to be scheduling meetings with town planners around us to get to know kind of what they're doing, and meet with some people in the regional planning office and state to help get my footing there. I'm hoping by the end of the month, I'll have a better idea of what I think the priorities are for us to be working on, and we can talk about that then. So anyway, that's it. So thank you for bringing me on board and being part of the team.
And new Vermont resident.
Yes, yes. I need to get my driver's license,
Yep.
but it's in the process.
So your license, right?
Yes.
You're helping our demographic trend line by moving into the state,
Yes.
so we appreciate that. Okay, great. The next item is to go over the agenda. So we'll have time for public comment, although I don't see anybody from the public online. We'll approve the minutes of September 17th. We were planning to interview SJ, who has applied for the vacant spot on the planning commission. But we need to make a change to the agenda because that interview will happen at a future date, not tonight. The majority of our time this evening will be plowing through the red line and our comments on the red line based on David's presentations the last time he was with us, which we're affectionately calling batch number 2 on the zoning regulation changes. We'll allow additional time for public comment then, if we have any, then share information about upcoming events, other business, and then take a few minutes to kind of map out the next couple of meetings together. We have a possible meeting on October 29th due to the calendar. Executive session if needed, and then we'll adjourn. And actually looking at the times, since we won't be doing the interview, it would be great to finish up a little bit early so that we have time for some cookies and some conversation. Okay, so I'm going to propose that we change item number 6, the interview, and postpone it to a future date to be determined.
I will second.
Okay, so Chris will second that. Thank you.
You made the motion.
I made the motion, yeah.
Okay.
Any discussion on the change in the schedule? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, great. So we will, wow. Okay, next topic is public comment. Is there anybody online for public
No,
comment?
there's no name at all.
Is that a first?
It's been first in a long time.
First,
Very-
but it's not unheard of.
You guys are doing something right. The public's happy.
First in a long time. Yeah, that's true. Okay, the next topic then, to have a motion to approve the minutes of September 17th.
So moved.
Sabrina, second.
Second.
Chris, thank you. Any corrections or clarifications on the minutes? Okay, approve the minutes. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So all four of us. Okay. Skipping number 6, so now going to the grant. So since we don't have any members of the public, I don't think we need to kind of set up the context, although maybe a little bit because there's the recording, so I will do that. We are in the midst of reviewing proposed amendments or suggested amendments that have been drafted by David White, the consultant. The planning commission has been working on this for the last 2 months, and we received batch number 2 of changes. So what David has done is organized his draft into chunks and shared those with us in advance of the meeting. The last meeting, he presented, gave his presentation, high-level changes. We gave him some feedback. We also provided comments to Chris in writing that we had questions on some email. So our goal today is to go through the comments that require discussion from the planning commission. So if there's comments that's like, this is a typo, or we don't need to spend time on it. I want to spend time on what we think are the most important things. And Chris has prepared this printout for us of basically a summary of the comments, which this is my comments, and then the second page, is that Wendy's comments?
Yeah, so the ones with the
Okay.
yellow highlight were for Wendy's. And those are the only 2, yours and Wendy's were the only 2 comments that were provided. Again, there's a lot of information in batch 2. So we got at least, one more bite at the apple. So, revisit it, and if all looks good, great. We'll move forward. If we need to address it, we'll address it. But the way things worked the last time with batch 1 seemed to be pretty effective. And I think there was some solid consensus as to what changes wanted to happen to move forward. So I would, if it worked the first time, it should work the second time.
Okay. One thing I'll say though is that these comments say Susan, but they're not all my comments, because what I did is I went back through the minutes from the last meeting. Because remember, we were talking about things and we deferred. We said, oh, that would be a good comment for a working session. So I included those in the category that they belong. So since I wasn't here when we did this last time, did you use the red line to go through and then refer to the comments, or did you just go through the comments?
We pretty much went through the comments and where or what, if we need to, we revisited the red line.
Okay,
And, so basically it was like, well, I think it said this or said that or whatever it may be. Or there was a comment, so we basically revisited the red line and then was able to either amend the comment or make sure that it dovetailed. So.
okay. All right, proceed. Is everybody okay? Start at the top of the list and go through?
Yeah, the only thing is, I just want to check in with Sabina. I thought I saw an email that you had,
I did. Chris, when do you want me to bring that up?
because I don't think those are in the print.
No, they're not.
No,
That came afterwards.
they're not. I think you can bring it up whenever you would like. Why don't you bring it up now, just because it's in context with sort of
Right.
working on the red line. I've got it here if you want to read this or.
Sure.
Yeah, you can just send that to Sabina, please. And I need it back because I need it for the record.
So I said, and this is in reference to the last meeting when we suggested to David that he make have all zones allow, triplexes, fourplexes, and so on, including the forestry and the rural ag district. So I, spent some time thinking about that between now and the last meeting, and I said, I would like to ask the PC to rescind the recent proposed change to the allowed uses for the forestry and rural ag zones or districts, and keep the current permitted uses to single and duplex dwellings until the PC has been able to do a similarly thoughtful and thorough review of the implications of those zoning changes as per the defined uses of those districts. Since we are going to be reviewing the NRO soon, I propose that any zoning updates for those districts be included in that process rather than part of this village center update. So, as Susan pointed out, it was not an official change, so it was just a recommendation that we made, but my thinking is that we haven't given the same amount of thought to any changes that are affecting other things, anything other than the village district, and I would like to make sure that we cover all of our bases and allow others to comment, like the Conservation Commission and things, before we just say it's okay. We might decide it's okay in the end, but I don't think we're there yet. So it's not a never or a no, it's just a let's wait.
So my thought or a recommendation or 2 cents is, if you're gonna be revisiting the NRO, which basically a lot of it encompasses the forestry, and the rural ag in those areas, that, what we're focused on here in the request is just the use table, so section 4, apart, and that use can be amended after the NRO has been reviewed and determined whatever changes may occur. It would make the most sense, and it would probably be most efficient to do it that way, as opposed to doing a change, potentially getting an application in play that's gonna have adverse impacts, or it's gonna be contrary to what the NRO is, or what the NRO could be. And we could have non-compliant or non-compliant structures or uses with future changes. So my recommendation would be, per Sabina's request, that leaving the uses as is right now for those districts, because it's outside the scope of the main scope of the grant, is fine. I think that there's a few things that we've discussed with regards to like we need to change the density calculation, but that should be townwide, so it should encompass all the districts. And if we're going to be looking at all the districts, then that would be the appropriate time, as opposed to doing it right now and having potential impacts on other districts that either work or don't work. So that's my 2 cents. And again, all we're talking about is is the use table for those 2 districts until the NRO has been looked at.
So my first question is what is the timeline on the NRO review? And if we push this down the road, how long does that push end up being? Which I don't know, nobody probably has the answer to that, but I totally understand your reservation. I have come to think that triplexes and fourplexes should be treated equally to single-family homes across the board. And if we don't want them in forestry or ag, then why do we have single-family homes there? Because I don't think you can make the argument that a triplex is going to be more invasive to those districts than a single-family home. So
I agree with you. I don't think we're saying that. And I think we just need to look at all aspects of development in those areas as part of our.
but going back to your question, if we approved it now, for example, and someone came up with a proposal for a triplex, it would still have to meet the existing NRO standards, which is true for a single family house. So
Yes, yep.
I just think, and if we're talking months, then that might be fine. If we're talking years, then I think I would push back on waiting, because I just think we've come from a period of overregulation and we need to move in the opposite direction a little bit.
Well, you guys are the board and body that is gonna determine the speed and action and execution of changing in regulations, so you're kind of in the driver's seat, you know, with regards to that. He's got a heavy foot for the gas pedal, so that should be fun. I mean, the thing is too, is that Sabina can make her proposal. We can go through the process. There can be a motion to approve that doesn't meet what Sabina wants, and she can vote against it if she decides to. In that majority, I mean,
Sure,
that would be the
sure.
process. So I think she's putting it out there for consideration. I don't think we need to decide it right now. But I think basically the ask is fairly minimal, and it is outside the village, the scope of the grant. And there is a bunch of stuff that really needs to be adjusted for the overall regulations for the whole town that can come into play, and whether that corresponds with the NRO and other things. I mean, so you guys, what's good is you guys, I think you've got the bandwidth with regards to doing multiple things, because we're looking here at the village center, we're looking at definitions, we're looking at uses, we're looking at a lot of different sections of the regulations all at one time, and we're, you know, getting through it. And so I think you've got the bandwidth. Is it 2 months? Probably not. Is it 2 years? Definitely not. So,
Right, okay.
yeah,
Go.
just clear as mud.
It's clear as
Heidi, do you
mud.
want to add something?
Yeah, I think I'm trying to catch up just because I don't entirely understand the implications of the NRO. Like I know that it stands for Natural Resource Overlay. That's about the depth of my understanding of what it is. And so like I was really proud of myself that I had the acronym. But I was thinking, what implication does updating the NRO have? Like, is it the same kind of project in a sense as what we're doing now to update NRO, that it's going to redefine the area, it's going to redefine what's important, what's not important, what we're allowing and not allowing? Just generally, is that what updating it means? Or what does updating it
I
actually mean?
mean, well, to some degree, it does mean that. So
Okay,
the idea behind the overlay district is that it called out specific natural resources. And in the event that there is a development proposal that involves one of those resources,
Yeah.
they're ranked in terms of hierarchy, in
Got
terms of importance, right? The idea is that if one of those resources could be impacted by development, the Conservation Commission is given the opportunity to weigh in. The idea is not to stop development. The idea is to make sure that development happens in the least invasive way possible when a resource is potentially affected. So it's not to say no, it's to say perhaps we could do it this way instead, and then preserve the resource that's been identified on this. So
Great.
that's
Okay.
the gist of it.
That's really helpful.
Okay.
Thank you.
It also, what ends up happening too, is that it also, if a project is involved in a portion of the NRO, whether it's a vernal pool or elevation district or things along those lines, then all of a sudden it can change the nature of the review. Instead of me being able to approve it, you know, as a permitted use, it may kick to a conditional use, which requires a DRV review. It requires other components because the NRO is kicked into that, requiring those standards to be reviewed and met.
Yeah.
And so it does, you know, we have a town here that has, you know, we have lowlands and we have highlands, you know, and so basically in between, there's a lot of different things that are that have the potential to be environmentally sensitive, so.
Okay.
And the
like-
reason we're
yeah.
changing, the reason it needs to be
Yeah.
updated is because the state just enacted Act 171, which is forest block protection, right?
Which
And so
Yeah.
that came into being after we created the NRO, and so now we need to make those two things align again, right?
Okay.
So our current NRO language doesn't reflect the newest statutes.
That's super helpful. Okay, so I definitely have an opinion if you want my opinion, if this is the place to offer it, then having heard that.
You know it.
Don't you know it? So yes, I actually, for me, it's about size and scale as opposed to how many occupancies, like how many like occupants there are, because we see McMansions go up and houses that are single family that, in my view, could, that same size could actually accommodate a triplex, right? And so, the argument for me is about the impact on the land and the natural resources as opposed to the type of building, whether it's a single, double, triple that is there. And so for me, I would say, in the meantime, if things are going to get built, I'd rather see multifamily or multiple units that are in the same size and, sort of in that area than a single family that's going to go, and then the next single family and the next single. That's my opinion, is it doesn't make sense to me. As long as we're not changing the pure size of what is going to be on that lot of land. That would be my opinion. So.
Does Act 171 have any sort of restrictions with regards to use or size of use or anything like that along those lines? I mean, I'm not familiar with Act 171. It probably doesn't say
I don't
you
think,
can't have multi-units or things like that.
no, I don't
Yeah.
think it goes into that.
Yeah.
And
So I
again,
think-
it's
yeah.
not that we wouldn't come to the same conclusion. I just think it should be part of a bigger discussion involving all that stuff.
I 100% agree with you. And I'm also conscious of the fact that decisions are being made all the time to make housing or not make housing while we're doing our deliberation. And I would not want our more, like, the balance of being more deliberative versus no action. Like, it's sort of like no decision is a decision, right? And so no decision right now on it means our decision is to de facto to keep what's there. And if we think we're probably going to be going in a different direction because our values are to protect natural resources and stimulate more housing simultaneously, if those are our shared goals, right? Then allowing and being very clear of expanding the usage now allows more development of the kind that we want versus someone being able between now and the next 5 months sort of just saying, great, or I really want to do this, but now I can only do a single house, or we haven't encouraged folks to go where they want. And it may be moot because it may be nobody wants to. But that's just the basis. But I do feel very strongly that we have been clear in our mission and vision and values for the town plan of promoting development in a way that also protects our very important natural resources. So we're not going to do anything that doesn't allow that to happen. Right? I don't feel like we're ever going to make a decision that trades that up. I just don't. I feel like that we heard from the community and we took very strongly the recommendations and the importance of what the Conservation Committee and our neighbors have told us about preserving natural lands here. So I just don't see us moving outside of that. And there's always the potential for an unintended consequence. And right now, my feeling is the unintended consequence of no action is more single family homes, where that is counter to our goal.
Go ahead, Jen.
Yeah, it's okay. I'm inclined to follow really from David's original recommendation, which was not to make the change. And then deferring to Chris, who's reaffirming that recommendation because
they know what
they're the expert, and because I agree with Sabina that unless we think it through, and this is the kind of thing that, like, I think about it like 2 o'clock in the morning. And I think that if we had our druthers today in those areas, Jericho might very well not allow single family homes. But it is almost impossible to ever go the other direction of limiting something that you, in the future, that you allow today. Which is why I agree with Sabina about being more cautious and saying, we very well might decide in the future that it's fine. I really like the NRO. I have a lot of confidence in it, but I don't have enough confidence in it. I know that there are weaknesses in it. I know that it's not quite tight enough, and I'm eager to get back to it. So I would definitely commit to making it a priority. I think our 25 work plan, is yet to be determined. And we didn't have what we needed to do the update, and now we have what we needed, which is mostly a better map. Resources added to the map that aren't on the map now. And then looking at the standards and making sure that the development standards really, in fact, do protect the resource. And then the last reason why I think we should wait is because of the Act 250 modernization, which says, have at it in the villages. No Act 250, you're exempt. And they said, and oh, by the way, we're going to come back to you in 2026 or something and tell you these areas need to be off limits. So whereas we can't say, I think it'd be really politically difficult to say no more single family in those places. It's quite possible that we will have the state and the regional planning commission telling us that that's the change that we have to make going forward for really sensitive areas. And they're going to do things like look at the length of the road and how deeply the driveway can penetrate and all those things. It just seems to me like it's not in the,
But would that not apply to single family homes?
I think it does, and that's what I'm saying. I think we should eliminate them potentially, except
But
that's like a
if that
huge-
Act 250 change comes, it'll affect whatever is allowed in those districts.
You need to understand
Yes, but
Act
then
250 is a state regulatory review, not a municipal review. So basically,
Okay.
so it may not be applicable.
But they're gonna create the tiers. They're gonna create tier 1, tier A, tier B, 1A, 1B.
Projects may not be applicable to those regulations.
Okay,
And CCRCP is also redoing its land use map,
Right.
so that may shape things up a little bit too. So again,
Right,
it's
it
about
seems like it's-
getting more information to
Seems
make
like
it
it's
happen.
not the right time to enable a different kind of or a different scale, because we don't really currently, that's the best way. And sure, you can build a McMansion, but you do have the data about the average single family house and the average multifamily, and one is bigger and one has more probably, and this is where we need the information, has more impact.
I think that was the original argument, is that the multiplexes are gonna be bigger. I don't think that, in reality, I don't think that's a fair argument to make. I don't think you could know that for sure. I don't
know that for sure,
I don't
but
think you can, and I don't think it's fair or appropriate that those multiplexes are treated differently than single family homes. I don't think it's.
I mean, one thing that we do have in
It
the,
feels like that decision was made a long time ago, which I don't personally agree with, so that feels like a wrong. And if we kick this down the road indefinitely, that feels like a second wrong. And so, I just.
Yeah, if I could jump in.
yeah,
I'm cognizant of the fact that we don't have a couple of our key members tonight, and as we said, we don't need to make the decision. I would love to maybe set it up for ourselves as a pro-con
Well, we-
something to come back
think
to
about it,
for a
yeah.
conversation. But I would really want to make sure that Wendy and Eric were part of it if we are moving towards a solid recommendation. So I really appreciate you bringing it up, Sabina, and hearing the conversation. I just know we're not going to solve it right now, and
Yeah.
it is
You're
7:30.
looking at the time.
I
Okay,
know.
I'll add one more clarification, which is there is something in the regulation now called adaptive reuse, where you can take an old building like a farmhouse or a barn and convert it. And I think that is gives you a little bit more flexibility. I don't remember off the top of my head what it lets you do, but that's different than building new for sure. But it is a way to enable some more multifamily in a rural district. That
I think the
talks about
original,
impacts.
the original intent would have been maybe better stated if it was related to size rather than
Yeah,
occupancy.
exactly. Yes.
So I think that if we wanted to do this correctly, we could look at that. I just don't want it, I don't want this to be something that we get to 5 years down the road because I.
Yeah, I don't
It's not-
either.
it's not gonna be 5 years though, Chris, it's not. Because we have
Okay.
the information, we just need to finish this and then move on to that. If I had a guess on the timeline or a request on the timeline, it would be 6 months.
Yeah,
You know, that we
It could
spend
be
the
in, like, the-
spring
yeah.
doing the due diligence on that. And I just have a quick question for Chris Flynn. Are there any, in any state or in Vermont, are there municipalities that restrict the upper limit of, like, is there a no McMansion rule? I remember that exists, I've heard that exists in some places, but I'm not sure if I'm remembering that correctly.
So, probably should lose the categorization of McMansion.
Well, okay, I'm just
But
saying.
I know,
You know what I'm getting
I know your point, I know what you're saying. There are, I mean, there's one height regulation, you know, anything over 2,500 feet's gotta go to Act 250. Because of the environmental sensitivity. So if you build a house at 2,400 feet, you don't go to Act 250, right? You follow the municipal rules.
You mean like
Height, the elevation.
elevation, not the height of the building?
No, yeah. So that kicks in certain reviews. I mean, if the town of Jericho decided it did not want single family homes in the rural ag and the forestry district, you can change the rules to that and not allow them. You have that ability. What you can't do is you can't say no single family homes anywhere in Jericho. You need to allow for that use, but you can dedicate or dictate where that use is. You can say it can only happen in the commercial district. We can have any single family homes built? Not many. So you have that ability to do that. I mean, if you're really worried about small houses and affordability and all this sort of thing, you have the ability to create an affordable housing overlay. That basically says, if you build a house this size for about this amount of money, you get this density bonus to have the density. And it allows the developer to build smaller but more and potentially make the same amount of money as he would. So you have that ability as well. There's a lot of different options to go and happen in this instance. What's in front of you is sort of saying, let's hold off on amounts of triplexes, fourplexes in these areas because the NRO falls within these areas. We know that Act 250 is going to develop some sensitivity issues that they want to make sure towns look at or replace via map and things along those lines, which are all great resources to be able to dovetail your regulations into. And zoning is done by Xerox. People copy what's good in one spot, modify it, and they bring it, to anything. We're not creating anything, that nobody hasn't created before. We're taking things and we're modifying them so the shoe fits. I don't know of any municipalities that say, okay, in this district, you can't build a house any bigger than this, or you can't do those types of things. I don't know of that. I don't think it gets regulated. I think, I just don't think it happens. I mean, I know in Stowe up in Robinson Springs, a guy built a 26,000 square foot house. And that sort of raised distinct, but Stowe didn't change anything. So.
All right, so maybe at this point we'll go along with Heidi's suggestion, do on it a little bit, figure out coming back to it. Maybe David also would have some suggestions for resolving.
Yeah, I think Heidi's point is fine. I think it's good. It basically is, if we have a few more iterations of these, this is going to reappear as part of the discussion.
Yeah.
And then there may be some more clarity or, for people in the way they feel, whether it's the 15th or the 29th.
Well, what I love is we're gonna have the marvelous notes from
From Nancy?
from Nancy. And we can use those and maybe we can put those into sort of a pro-con sort of mix, so that we bring it back to ourselves and
Okay.
invite
And more
everyone,
structured. Yeah, okay,
and Wendy.
okay. That was a good warm up.
I do think,
Yeah.
one last thing, I think
Sure.
it's maybe, we don't necessarily disagree on principle, it's more on timing.
Yeah,
Yes.
So I think the pros and cons thing is not necessarily
Thank you, Chris.
relevant, I think it's more about
Mhm.
timing. I'd be happy to wait if the waiting isn't just pushing it down the road to not get to it.
Yeah,
So we could commit to
yeah,
getting to it.
but Chris is right, it's really up to us, and if we
Sure.
decide that that's the very next thing we work on, now that we
Sure.
find, now that we have what we need, which basically was delivered in 2024.
great.
Yeah.
And for clarification purposes, Sabina, you're talking just those districts, so we have lots of areas in the town that are not either the agriculture and forestry or the town centers. Isn't there a middle?
Yeah, so David showed us a table of
Right.
uses with edits,
Yeah,
and
so-
I think
For all those. who
actually
say-
at the last meeting, I raised questions about those last couple of columns.
Thank you.
But the rest of them seemed fine, and I do also agree with you guys that it's less about people and how the households are structured and more about size and scale and impact. And, and I think a lot about cars.
There's lots of ways to deal with size, scale, and impact.
Yeah.
And you can associate those with fees through the select board.
Yep.
So there's lots of opportunities if you want to disincentivize certain things and you want to incentivize others. I mean,
Or do what you said, where, below a certain amount, part of our changes are what's administrative review, what goes to the DRB, so maybe things under whatever, 3,000 square feet get slid through regardless, and things over, but we don't have time.
development deals with the carrot and the stick.
Mhm,
This is the stick.
mhm,
The permit's the carrot. Make the permit bigger than the stick
mhm,
and you'll get what you want through your regulations.
mhm.
So.
Okay, parking minimums. I kind of think parking minimums in a way is sort of similar. It sounded like there was consensus from the planning commission to either reduce or eliminate parking minimums, reduce even more than so David's original proposal was to reduce them, and then we all said maybe just get rid of them. However, Eric had some concerns, Heidi had concerns, and I had concerns. I think there were a lot of concerns. So I think the question is kind of to David, which is, if we get rid of it, how do you make sure you don't have, the Palmer Maple problem where the entity hasn't really taken enough account?
Well, the long and short, if Palmer Maple's not a great example from a zoning use standpoint because their square footage is so small, they've got adequate parking for their size of their use through the regulations. It's just that they're so popular that they have spillover and that has the impact. So, if you,
But that says to me, maybe square footage is not the right variable. Maybe it's more about customer visits per hour or, something to that effect.
right, and I think some of the premises is, if we look at, you look at, I guess, the JCat, the tavern, right? So that's got a lot of parking. And that's all based on basically tables and number of seats in that district. So I think the intent was, okay, well, the minimum that needs to happen there from a use standpoint could be 2 spaces per 4 seats. And so you gotta figure out how many seats you're gonna have and you do the multiplier. And I think the intent was basically not saying, okay, well, you need to have 2 seats, whether you cut it in half or you say, or you do square footage. If you look at the form-based code today, you put a restaurant in the form-based code up near the Jericho market. It's not based on, seats, it's based on square footage. So you can have the same size place, the same use as a JCat, and be required to have 35 spaces here. And at the market, through the regulations, you may be required to have 11.
So you guys know it better than we do. So your basic premise, your suggestion here is go ahead and eliminate parking minimums, but still require the applicant to provide a parking plan and to discuss how their parking needs are going to be handled, and then the rest of it would be handled by an ordinance. So I would say that's what we want David to draft, whatever the backstop is, to make sure that it's not gonna be like a big problem.
Right, because
If we eliminate it,
you look at Jericho Market, there's always parking.
right?
You look
I
at
think-
Union Bank, there's always
All
parking.
right, I think we're convinced that parking is a big waste of a lot of land and that the business can figure out for itself.
Right.
It's not up to the town, but we also understand that we don't want to cause adverse impacts on everybody else around the business, and then safety issues, disabled access and other things. So it needs to be more than just deleting the table.
No, I agree.
Okay. Building structure is just terminology. It's just it's probably not worth talking about. Adding definitions on canopies and fuel canopies. Child-based childcare, literally just making the alphabetical order of the list better. So that you have the qualifier after the topic rather than otherwise, so that all your childcare uses would be listed together.
Okay.
Dwelling accessory to a farm, add to clarify is located on farm premises, and you're saying not necessarily.
It could be on its own individual lot. If we look at, say, the Davis Farm on Silly Hill, they've got some multiple residents that are basically farm housing, but they're on separate lots. The Davises may own the property, but they're on separate lots.
And if they're on separate lots, then do they benefit from all of the flexibility of being a dwelling accessory to a farm? And what if it's a lot, a mile away?
No, actually, I mean, in that instance, I could be the farmer, sort of say, okay, I want to build another house accessory to my farm, and those rules would apply. So I was just looking at the use, in the practical standpoint.
So this is under under definitions.
So it doesn't, I could have a vacant lot, I could put a house on that vacant lot, which would be, tied to my farm, so it would be an accessory, be an accessory to the farm. And it would be allowed. It goes, the gate swings sort of both ways.
I say now I'm actually more confused, sorry.
Right. I would say if that's it, then that shouldn't, well, it is a question. It wasn't really, I was saying, this is sort of more of a question to David, like, isn't this what you mean? Like, aren't you missing this
Okay.
phrase? And because everything he talked about in the standards related to that sort of implied that the dwelling accessory is on the farm premises. Premises is kind of a weird word because it's not really a lot, and it's not really a parcel, so maybe premises is the wrong word, but that's exactly what I was trying to differentiate, is that when does it become just a dwelling? And when is it a dwelling accessory to farm?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, and so there are, most municipalities that I've worked with in the past, when they have that, it's actually the structure, the residential structure is on the farm property. It's not on its own individual lot.
Yep.
But there are lots of farmers who have multiple lots next to their farm where they have, their housing for their employees. So that's why I say the gate swings will apply. But yeah, we'll get clarity on that. I mean, I think the clean intent is basically say, if you're gonna have a dwelling accessory to a farm, you want it on the property.
Right,
One would
right.
think.
Yeah.
That's just a cleaner way to do it.
Yeah. Okay. What does RAP stand for?
Required agricultural practice.
And we can't
It's a
spell that
state-
out?
Well, I don't know, but it's a state thing. What Chris said is true. We don't have jurisdiction over that.
I wasn't asking for jurisdiction. I was just saying in the definition, shouldn't we spell it out?
We should not use acronyms.
I didn't know what it meant.
Let's not use
I didn't
acronyms.
really know even how to look it up.
Right, that's what it stands for.
Right, so I was just asking for it to be.
Okay.
Okay, fitness was a typo, manufacturing. I feel like that's just sort of a detailed question for you and David to decide how you want to respond to that comment. Mixed use, okay, so in this definition, it uses the word site, but site in and of itself is not a defined term. So does site mean lot or a portion of a lot?
Yeah, or the property, see, it's the site where the structure or the use is occurring. So
So why use the word site? Why not use the word lot?
I think it's a generic, it's sort of an industry used, you know, we call it porches, we don't call them stoops or, you know, whatever it may be.
Right.
It's tomato, tomato.
You see, I come from the world of contracts though,
Yeah,
where
right.
people would spend millions of dollars to argue about that. And they'd be like, it's the site, it's close by, it's the, you
I'm
know.
married to a contractual lawyer.
Okay.
Very familiar
Right.
with the nuance of
Right,
words.
okay, so,
And I'm dyslexic and I get a lot of them wrong.
so that's just terminology. Okay, then we have this discussion about mobile home. I would like to defer this until Wendy's here also because I think this comment, I had a comment on it, she had a comment on it. Okay.
And we can put a star for 15.
So the definition of motel, all the other hospitality definitions included the phrase less than 30 days. And motel did not include that phrase. It seems like, shouldn't it include that phrase? Isn't that what he's saying? I think it was just an oversight in his draft.
I don't know if that's what he's saying. I mean, I can ask, you know, for a reference.
Okay,
Well, it sounds like what Susan is saying is, if all the other short-term stay places have a less than 30 days, why don't we use that same language for motels as
Yeah.
we're using elsewhere?
right.
No, that's fine. I mean, that's why I just threw in, do you want to extend the stay?
Yeah.
Okay, and you did the same thing about site.
Yep.
And then, retail outdoor, so he used the term footprint. But we have all these other rigorous definitions of ground floor area, or ground floor area, or total square footage. It just seemed like a random term.
It's an industry term that, you know, if you're, like, you know, if
And it's
you're
just,
exposed to the industry, you know exactly what a footprint is,
and it's just the building.
just the structure.
But as Heidi pointed out in our last meeting, we're hoping like homeowners develop duplexes, and so the more accessible the language is, so could it say building footprint? So that it's clear to people like us?
You can say building footprint.
Okay,
Let's do that.
That's fine.
So road, so there's a definition of a road that basically makes it sound like the only purpose of a road is to move cars.
Right. Yeah, that's why, I mean, I had a question is, do you want, and then there's another part that says path that says you can have all these things, bicycle stuff. I'm like, all right, well, can you have an e-bike because that's got a motor? Is that more, you know?
Right,
Is there a conflict there? I
right,
mean, the long and short of it is, would it ever be enforced? Probably not.
right.
But I mean, it's, so you.
So I guess maybe the road is less about non-motorized uses and more about users, more about people who are not in a car. They're on foot, they're on some sort of a bicycle, could be an e-bike, so non-motorized probably isn't the right term. It's more about, we have these roads and we no longer want the roads to only transport vehicles.
So you want to, yeah, so essentially multimodal function.
Yes. Complete streets would be the best.
I don't really have any idea what a complete street is. It's another tag, it's like workforce housing.
Well, we want them, we know that. Maybe not in every location. But we just want to acknowledge that in the definition of a road, it serves more than vehicles, which is
Right,
what
yeah,
it
it's
says.
being a multimodal roadway system.
Okay, districts, you had no comment, so that'll just go directly to David. Like, I think I mentioned this to him when we were together, and he didn't seem to have a problem with it. That the purpose of the districts to include mentions of the schools.
Right, and what we want to make sure that if we've described the district in the town plan, we want to make sure the description of the district and the regulations that they tie together, because that'll help. It takes both documents and sort of marries them up, which is good.
Right.
And if it hasn't been defined, when you go to amend the town plan, then just
Right.
make sure that those things are included.
Okay, so the next item was around uses. So there's an intro phrase or something that talks about allowed, exempt, permitted. And David was like, there's three things. There's 1, 2, 3, but he was using these other terms. And I think I said this in the last meeting and I didn't feel like I got the best answer, or I didn't hear the answer, which is if something is exempt, it means it doesn't need a permit.
Mhm.
But does it also mean that it doesn't have to follow any rules? It's like above and beyond the reach of the regulations, or does exempt really just mean exempt from requiring a permit, but all the other rules have to be followed, otherwise something happens?
The uses that he lists here. So here's where this is where the RAP comes into place. So the uses that he lists in the sections that are exempt, a lot of them are agricultural uses, right? So if you get agricultural designation and you decide you want to build in the high elevation block, things
Yeah.
along those lines, they would be exempt from municipal review. They wouldn't have any review, any permit. And they would basically, the state would have authority with regards to that review, and the agency of agriculture would review that. So in that exempt category, because it's tied to the RAP, then they wouldn't have any sort of say. And if Chris decided he wanted to build a sugar house that he didn't have agricultural designation, then he would have to meet all the rules. He would have to get a permit because he is not exempt.
But there are
But
some
then-
things in, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I guess has not been my understanding historically. I took that to mean exempt from the permit process, but not exempt from
But all the
Yeah,
exempt,
so it-
yeah, if you look at
whatever else would apply.
if we look at what he basically is saying, and he's categorizing as exempt, he's tying it to a state statute, which basically is the RAP statute.
He's changing the table. We used to have this concept of allowed,
Yeah,
which was different. It wasn't exempt because you're ag. I
Right.
get that.
Right.
State law, we have nothing to
Right.
say. Allowed was, Jericho was saying, you can do that, have this water bottle right here, and you do not need a permit to do that.
Mhm.
But I thought the definition of allowed said, you don't need a permit, but you still need to do everything the way you're supposed to do it. For some reason, he's eliminating that category of allowed and calling everything exempt, and to me, that seems
Right,
confusing.
and what David is doing, there is intent, and it all ties to basically getting agricultural designation.
But if you look at his table, he has things in there that are exempt that don't meet that, what you just said is the definition, the criteria.
They actually do,
And all of
they do. So, stable boarding house, so if you have, I think it's 8 horses, you can get agricultural designation. If you have 8 pigs that you raise, you can get agricultural designation, you don't need no review.
them? So then is there nothing in the table now that doesn't require a permit?
And you're saying the red wine? Yeah. So what he's proposed here is, except slaughterhouse. All the other uses, which he's got, farm structures, accessory farm structures, silvicultural practices, greenhouses, maple sugaring, stable boarding, and community gardens. Well, actually, excuse me, community gardens are permanent. I overread. But all of those, there's a huge list of things that are agricultural uses. if you want to, if you have, an egg producer, you have to have 250 chickens. If you have 249, you don't get designation,
Right.
and you'd have to meet
Okay,
all the town
but
rules.
you know our regulations and you know that there's a section that says, if you do one of the following things,
Right.
not these ag things.
Right.
If you do one of the following things, I forget, structures below a certain amount, like if I build a little tool shed, not a sugar shed, a tool shed, whatever. These things, blah, 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 are exempt,
No,
they're allowed.
no, well, no, actually, it's called de minimis permit, basically, it's called de minimis, doesn't need a permit. And so
Right.
those de minimis items are like steps going off a front porch,
Right.
a shed that's below 64 square feet. And that's an accessory structure. And you can call a barn an accessory structure.
Okay, so I'll take your word for it, but when we see like the final red line.
Right.
That's what we'll be looking for, is just making sure that
Right.
and also making sure that the definitions of uses in the definitions section, there's a definition of uses. And in that definition, the words allowed, exempt are in there. In his new stuff, I don't think it's in the existing, it's just.
No, I just wanted to see if there was a definition for allowed and if you had anything that was besides, so any place in the existing regulations that says allowed, it's now been changed to exempt. So,
Okay,
yeah, so it's,
but what, you're just telling that, why would that be? Because what if it's not one of those ag things?
I have people come to me all the time and say, I'm gonna get a horse in a barn. I'm gonna build a barn and I'm gonna do these things. And so I don't need a permit. I'm gonna be a farmer. You have agricultural designation. No, I don't. You're not a farmer. You're just like everybody else. You need to get a permit. You
Okay,
need to meet the regulations in the review. What ends up happening is basically is they need to apply to the state reviews their application. The state says, yes, you do have designation. And then basically that information comes to me. And basically they, we end up essentially acknowledging that have designation so that our municipal rules do not apply. And we don't have jurisdictional enforcement over them.
right,
But what's weird or terrible, in my opinion, is you can go ahead and build a barn in the setback if you have agricultural designation, and then you can decide to stop being a farmer, and
right,
lose your designation. Now we've got a non-compliant structure,
right,
and the state has basically said, well, if they lose designation, you can make them get a permit from the town. Like, you can't make them get a permit if they can't meet the rules.
right.
So it's
It's a
really.
catch-22.
It's a
Right,
bad
so
situation.
I guess when we see the final red line, we're gonna wanna be really meticulous about that the definitions, line up all the way through. Either we're using them or we're not using them.
Right, how much, what we want cleaner clarity
Yeah,
on what's exempt and why,
right.
you know?
And then I wanna ask Christopher Michael if he ever gets projects that come where somebody says, I have a horse and I want to build a barn in Washington DC. Like, does that feel like a really foreign use case for you?
We did have a very controversial issue with chickens.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
And the requirements were, I think it had to be 500 feet from an adjacent property when there was like one property in the city that actually qualified.
yeah,
And there was a lawsuit and
yeah,
now those people have their chickens. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Wait till you meet Shadow the rooster over on
Yeah.
Skyview.
Okay.
He raises hell.
Yeah.
Okay, 4.4 table of uses. This is where Heidi was talking about. He read the thing 3 times and didn't understand it. He was gonna
Yes.
go back and take a look at it. Yeah. Do we need to talk about it
We
or
do
we're
not.
just let him
We're
edit
just-
it?
It's a subordinate use to the primary.
Okay, housing uses per district. This is basically Sabina's
Mhm.
point that she stated much more eloquently, which was up to 4 units per district, but we needed to resolve some of these districts where that seemed to not make quite as much immediate, completely unreserved sense. Okay, so 2.1 is just text. Senior housing. So,
Hopefully my comment follows your context.
yes, except it doesn't really solve the concern. So I raised this to David last meeting, and I'm actually interested in what planning commission people think about this. So he went through and clarified all those definitions about like continuing care community, nursing home, senior housing, which is for rich people with a golf course, and it does absolutely nothing else except completely age restrict who can live there, which I totally object to. But in any event, he went through and made those definitions, but then in the use table, some of those senior housing uses were allowed in these districts where we don't allow, say, 5+, and we didn't necessarily seem to need to debate that. So I was saying, like, isn't that kind of not really consistent? Because a Wake Robin or that would qualify like that would have a really, potentially a very large impact. And is that really the right location? I just knew Chris today that after I did planning for about 3 years, I finally realized how important the map is. And it's really about, you want everything. You want as much variety, you want as much opportunity, you want as much growth and vibrancy. It's really just a matter of where. And is Nashville Road, say, where we would want, not where we would want, where it's appropriate to have a development like Wake Robin.
Why do you think it's permitted now?
It's not, but in David's red line in the use table, he was suggesting a very I thought it was pretty much allowing like almost everything everywhere, and that didn't sit quite right with me.
And you're probably referring to residential care group home?
No, that one's pretty small. I think that's like 10 or fewer residents.
Okay.
It was
The continued care.
continued care, nursing home, assisted living.
Yeah, they're all conditional uses, so they need to go through a review.
Right, but they're not currently conditional uses. I think they're currently not allowed, or are they currently conditional uses? Because I'm not sure conditional use solves every problem either.
Yeah, no, what they are, we don't really have, those defined uses. So
Right.
we have basically a residential care group home. And so,
Right, you're right. It's the new uses that he added
right.
that seem to me to be large scale, large impact. Of course, we want senior housing.
Mhm.
If
Yeah,
it's
And
large scale, it should be
The
in a
best
village
place,
center.
it should be in a village center, right? Or at least the village, like just beyond the village center, or the commercial district.
Yes.
But to me, not low density, rural ag,
Mhm.
forestry.
I'm just gonna put change use area.
I would agree with that.
Okay, anybody not agree with that? Okay. Somebody else want to run the list? Or you're not tired of hearing me talk?
Keep going with it.
Go, keep going, okay.
But thank you for noticing, for calling the question.
Okay. Oh, this is just, this use should not be expanded now. This is Sabina's comment that we already just talked about.
Yep.
ADUs. So currently ADUs are only allowed with single family. And because of the state law, you have to allow ADUs for single family as long as they meet the criteria. And our criteria is a little bit more flexible than the state law says currently. What the question I was asking is, what about ADUs that might be associated with a unit of a duplex or a unit of a triplex or a unit of a quad? However, since those kinds of multifamily structures tend to have common spaces, would an ADU potentially be like a problem for the other?
Well, I think we're a long way from worrying about ADUs in Jericho because of septic. It's just not, we can talk about it forever, but the septic is a rate limiting fact in almost all the town. And so I just, but given that,
So my one comment would be, currently right now, ADUs are allowed, the state is sort of mandated that ADUs are allowed. So when somebody comes to me with an ADU, right, we don't really consider any sort of density calculation or things along those lines are allowed. And you can have them this size. This or whatever it may be, and you need to get to basically the state water and wastewater, whether it's your existing system or new system. With duplexes and things along those lines, the same thing would kind of apply. And the curiosity is because of the state law, that already, if they tie it to a dwelling unit.
They don't, they
just
tie it
single
to a
family?
single household
Okay, all right.
structure.
So the curiosity would be, can you develop a regulation that allows you to develop ADUs on multi-unit buildings? But you're gonna have to create your criteria that hopefully doesn't
Right.
conflict with the state. And I don't think you would get pushback from the state
No.
because there's housing need, you're basically.
Yeah, you can be more flexible than the state. You can't just be more strict than the state.
You gotta meet their threshold, yeah.
are we assuming that would only be the case with an owner occupied unit or a condo?
The state allows you to require that, but Jericho does not require. We require owner occupied in,
No,
Well, I mean, if
Either
you had
unit.
but if you had, I mean, I can't imagine this scenario actually happening, but if you rented in a duplex or a triplex and you wanted to do an ADU, is that different?
oh yeah, I wouldn't think only the property owner would be able to apply and construct the ADU. But,
you have another unit to rent.
right, then they would have another unit to rent, but the renter couldn't develop the ADU. They have no property rights.
I actually like the way Chris in the red said that you could say ADUs are allowed on multifamily structures with no adverse impacts on surrounding units. If there's a way to construct it that way.
All multifamily or multifamily up to 4? Since it kind of seems like 4 and below. Hey, Eric.
Hey, you left me a seat with my name on it and everything. Wow.
Right next to the cookies too.
A bundle that was saying,
I didn't have
should
to
be the
search.
same as single family. So let's say we buy your argument. Should be the same as a single family, then shouldn't
Yeah.
that structure, and should every unit in the structure get an ADU or?
If
You can't discriminate.
Yeah,
Then yes. We'll have
Can
more
I ask
housing.
a question?
right, yes.
Are the multi-unit buildings, are they on one lot that's collectively owned? Or is it like a row house where unit has its own lot?
Well, multi-unit buildings are a figment of our imagination because we hardly have any, but yeah, they could be both. We don't,
They're generally rentals and not condos. But there's nothing that regulates that.
right. We do have some, like the condos off of Raceway where they're kind of attached, right? They're attached, or the ones by the church, also on Raceway.
Yeah.
We also have in Starbucks Circle, there's a whole slew of those, multi-unit condos.
Little-
So Eric, the question that we're just talking about now is, so we're on page 2 of 3.
Mhm.
Is ADUs right now,
Yep.
you're allowed with a single family.
Mhm.
Would multifamilies, as a way of increasing housing, increasing the opportunity for ADUs? Like Chris said, very few few and far between because of septic, because of cost, because of complexity, issues, whatever. Do you have any objection to a 3-family house triplex that 1 or 2 of those units could, if they owned the unit or the owner of the property wanted to develop an ADU?
But they would have to own the land.
Yeah, it would just be like any other property application.
So the concept that would end up going on,
Well, how does that work? I guess I don't know how that works in a context.
say I can build a
Oh, I see
triplex.
what you're saying.
So I can build a triplex, right? So I go ahead and build the triplex, right? And so I've got my 3 units. And the rules would allow me to put on 3 more units, right? 1 in each unit. So now I've got 6 units, as long as I was able to get water, wastewater. And the way the structure was, that wasn't adversely impacting, the other.
Are you the owner of the triplex and you're renting it out?
Yeah.
Or are you one of the owners within the
No,
triplex?
there wouldn't be, presently right now, we don't have owner occupancy requirements.
Right, but what Chris and Eric, and I think where Chris Shaheen was going was in the situation where it's a condo, the land is basically common. You want to build the ADU, maybe if it's inside your condo, like you have a basement storage unit, you want to turn that into a little, basement dwelling versus expanding onto the land. So maybe that's one of the criteria is that if it's not a new structure or
Add to the footprint.
right, you're gonna add to the footprint. And, so I don't know, maybe it's a little too complicated.
I think the bigger issue on that is most of the condo associations, if you have a condo household, whether you own 1 unit or 2 units, if it's an association with other homeowners in there, you're not gonna get approval for it anyway. So saying you can do it is,
Right.
Well, unless everybody wanted to do it.
Right.
That could happen.
So what goes on now, Eric could live in unit A, 84A, and he would want a storage shed that's on the common land. If he gets the homeowners association basically saying, yeah, we'll give you the approval to, go ahead and build a storage shed, then I can issue the permit to them, and then basically the association will have a copy of where that shed or that improvement is, on the property. But because he's part of the association and he doesn't own the land, like, what probably everybody, traditionally does, he's got to go through that additional step, for the association. So he'll go to a
Right.
meeting and say, I want to do a shed, and they say yes or no.
So I guess I would also just, if nobody's opposed, take it to David and see if there's a simple way to increase the opportunities for ADUs, acknowledging that this is a very rare case, and so it might not, it's not gonna be worth a lot of time to draft something that's hardly ever gonna happen. But it's kind of the principle of the thing.
I would love to also remind us that even what's not gonna happen now could very well change if we ever realize our goal of increasing wastewater.
Right.
In town.
Right.
That's game changer. And so if what we're doing now is with intention to spur future. And one of the other coinciding things is to get more investment in our infrastructure. Some of these things that seem crazy to him now might actually not be crazy. to
Right.
him then.
So maybe we also defer this and deal with it.
No, I think
But
it's-
if we can't solve it right this
Right,
second,
yeah, no, but I think it's important to not, actually more I was arguing towards, don't put it off the table because it doesn't seem feasible now.
Mhm.
Like it
Oh, I see
doesn't
what you're
seem
saying.
practical now. What's not practical now could be very practical and lucrative later.
Mhm.
Like if all of a sudden there were ways to do it because there's wastewater and people don't have to buy their own septic.
I mean, I'm in favor of
Yeah.
allowing it for any unit.
So the long and short of the reality is what exists now as units, the likelihood of them changing is probably remote or low percentage. But if I'm gonna go build a multi-unit building, right? But I can only afford to build a triplex or a fourplex, I'm gonna basically rent it, depreciate it, get my capital, but I have the ability to add 3 more units.
Yeah.
Small cottage type units or 1-bedroom units or whatever it may be. I'm gonna make sure when I start, I'm planning for that.
Right,
And that has that has that allowance, so you're planning for the future.
right.
And whether that future is a year or now, so the curiosity is, would it happen with existing stuff? It's a tougher nut to crack, but anything in the future has the potential to allow more housing.
Right, so it's sort of like, it's not up to us to figure out the homeowners thing,
Yeah.
it's gotta have all the right,
It's it's the carrot and the stick.
right.
You basically just put a carrot out there.
But there's
for
no
people.
reason why we should stand in the way of not allowing an ADU.
Right.
If it's just because it happens to be attached or associated with a multifamily building.
So, I
Okay,
mean, you can do a triplex and you can do ADUs on either end, which wouldn't have an adverse impact on, probably all the units. If you try to do them off the back of all 3 units, then maybe it would have an adverse impact. So there's
Right.
ways, but you're letting the you're giving an opportunity to the private sector to solve and address what they may be able to
Right.
do.
it's kind of a good example though of an unintended consequence. Because let's say now you say, okay, 4 units in the forestry district and everybody can have an ADU, now you've got 8, now so that's why I think Sabina's right about
Yeah.
thinking that carefully through, because you have all of these other levers that can be pulled.
Zoning's like a domino, you touch one.
Yeah.
it starts
Oh, yeah.
affecting a lot of different things.
Yep, okay, the next one was really just about grammar. And so now we're on to even. Oh, so this is about fuel sales, so this would be more of a village center kind of a thing, so.
So what essentially, I mean,
Oh, so this is what the text says. If car wash or repair are to be included as accessory uses to fuel sales, such facilities shall also comply with the standards applicable to those uses. That's what the text says.
Okay.
My question is, to those uses, which uses? Is it the accessory uses, the
Yeah.
standards to the accessory uses?
so the primary use is, say, we have a fuel station right now, sometimes they have the bay where you can get your car washed.
Yep,
So that would be the accessory use to the primary use on that lot. And that accessory use would still have to meet all the standards if they want to have a standalone car lot.
yep. Okay, so the text could potentially say applicable to those accessory uses.
Yeah.
Okay, and then I was like, why? Oh, why mention this? If you,
Because it gives you teeth.
right, okay, so we can take out why mention this, that all doesn't, if he could just add accessory uses. Okay, okay, 4719, I don't have the original text, so I don't really know what I was talking about. Are these sales permitted or are they exempt?
Now, is this in the red line or it must be, let's see what the
4719. Not sure.
those car sales or is this?
I would imagine car sales would be exempt.
No, 47. It must be a typo because it's 47 is basically water, it's water storage
Oh,
facility.
so the previous one was 4713.6.
4713.6.
So maybe this is 47. I don't know.
47. Well. Why don't you look at it, we can
Yes,
revisit,
sorry.
instead of
Yeah.
trying to guess, because, there really isn't anything that drops us down to number 9.
Okay, 4721. He added some text in there about dining areas in the front and the side and the back, whatever. And my question was, should they be allowed without a fence or a screen? Isn't the buffer to an adjacent use more important?
So the buffers the buffers are just what they are. They're buffers between properties and the uses. And so you wanna, they're talking about having space. So you could have a buffer with regards to a building. And so I think what you're asking is if I'm allowing outside seating, should that seating still observe that buffer? Or is it allowed to encroach in the buffer? Because
Well, I think it was more, isn't he saying, is he saying should be allowed to the side with a fence and screen or without a fence and screen? Or he doesn't say?
oh, I'll have to ask him. I would tend to think, see, I can't find that.
So I might have to have the numbers wrong.
21. Okay, wait a minute. With the exception along the front building line, decorative walls or fencing shall be used in outdoor areas. So basically,
Oh, so
so
he
it should be used.
should be used in the front. And
Well,
my
it says
question
along
is,
the front of the building, decorative walls and fencing should be used
right,
to enclose outdoor areas.
so my question is,
Except along the front of the wall.
I'm sorry.
It said except along the front, everything else needs to have the decorative wall. There's no-
With the exception along the front line, yeah,
Everything else needs to be screened.
yeah. So those are the side and back, so basically the front.
okay, so forget my question, I misunderstood.
Okay, so we're gonna cross that one out.
Okay, the next one, it's outdoor lighting, outdoor on a patio is still subject to outdoor lighting,
Yep.
okay?
Yep, our standards, yeah.
How could, if you had a bunch of string lights around a big pergola, how would that?
It's all based on, basically, light distribution foot candles. And so,
I'm just thinking that wouldn't be downcast lighting.
no, I mean, you
I
want
just don't
strict,
know how strict we are.
right now, so basically, it's the current regulations, it's called light distribution pattern, that basically here's how light distributes when it hits the ground. And it's based on the light foot candle, so you don't get a lot of bounce back or glare. With what you're talking about, that's decorative lighting. Maybe either decorative lighting, maybe that's exempt, or you don't allow it. So I mean, I think that's a question to sort of noodle on.
In reality, it's not enforced.
Well, no, it is, it isn't, so.
I'm pointing fingers, I'm just.
No.
Practical, it's
No,
not-
yeah, no, I mean, so, we have certain, properties where lights are supposed to be turned off at night, things along those lines, and they're not. And so I get contacted, and the property owner gets contacted, and then the lights turn off, and then somebody forgets to turn them off, and I get contacted.
Right.
And so, there is a process in place to address that. Is it perfect? No. So, I mean, the reality is too, if you tell me it's happening, I need to observe it, right? So lights aren't turned off at midnight. Well, like let me driving by here at midnight, there's something going on. So.
Well, I think the question is for this though, is that if we're going to have outdoor dining establishments or establishments that include outdoor dining, what do we want to do about them? Do we want to say that even if whether it's decorative, accessory, or lighting, primary lighting, that it needs to conform with the outdoor lighting rules, or are we saying there's something different because it's decorative or it's for the purposes of a business?
Right, so I would say, I mean, I can find out, if there are decorative lighting standards or things like that, which maybe makes sense to adopt. I mean, everybody has that type of lighting if you're sitting outside, right? You're not gonna have,
Yeah.
a shoebox light downcast over an area.
Well, then the holiday lights.
That's what I'm starting out,
Right.
Yeah, I was gonna, I assume the goal of having outdoor seating in front of the building on the street side is to activate the street and public space and activate the front. Are there guidelines for what you can't do? Like, you can't put a 6-foot privacy fence around that space, or you can't, like, is there a fence height limit?
Anything 6 feet or under does not need a permit. It's a de minimis.
So if someone's doing seating in front of a restaurant like that, I would think we would want to specify it can be surrounded by a fence up to 36 inches or something like that, so that the intent of allowing it is being realized.
Yeah, I mean, right. Yeah, right. I think that's fine. I think that would be applicable, especially when if we have a denser, more infill type area. If we had outdoor seating at the JCAT, having a fence around where they're seating, would that be applicable or not? I'm not 100% sure.
No, but on Route 15 and in Riverside, I could imagine a case where you want a 6-foot fence because you were on a busy road, and you wanted to sit outside, but you didn't want to be in the traffic.
So is the
Really
goal of
small.
this to allow an expansion of just expanding seating capacity for a business? Or is the goal to activate the public space? And I think that would be the question, and you would want the regulation to reinforce whatever that goal is.
I mean, I know liquor control law, so if you have outdoor liquor, you have to have a fence around it, so you can't take the liquor outside of the fence.
Yeah, and that may have maybe that has a height minimum of 42 inches or something.
Not, it's, one of these table heights kind of thing.
But 42 inches in an open fence is not a solid privacy fence.
Right.
I don't think currently the Jericho regulations really address it. It probably just treats it like a fence.
Yeah,
Yeah,
this is
Why?
allowing something that's not allowed now. Now would be the time to put in. with
Yeah,
that.
so that's, you're looking at the red line.
yeah.
Yeah,
So David was adding that. So if that, and that's also, is that in the, anywhere, or is that in the village center, or is that Riverside
Anywhere.
associated with a business,
Yes, so it's associated with the,
outdoor dining?
this is outdoor dining entertainment, so that's basically, it doesn't, say, outdoor dining is not, it's not, so dining, so wherever restaurants, those places are allowed, is used, and, as you can either eat inside, or if you're gonna eat outside, then you need to meet these provisions.
Mm.
These provisions need to come into play.
Mhm.
sorry, I have even more questions. So is outdoor seating allowed specifically to businesses that have a restaurant CFO, or is it allowed for any business?
We can sit on your front porch.
Well,
Business.
Joe's doesn't have any, Joe's has outdoor seating, there's no fencing around that.
No, but they put up, no, there is no fencing, it's not required.
They don't serve alcohol either, so.
Yeah, but that's not really addressing Chris's question, which is, do we care what kind of business is allowing outdoor dining? Does it have to be a business that is,
Yeah, if
Restaurant,
it's for
right.
outdoor dining,
yeah,
then that would by definition mean a bank couldn't have outdoor seating because they're not selling food.
So if you had a use and you were barber and you wanted to sit outside and a couple people there, it'd probably be fun.
Well, but are you just talking about picnic tables on the property where somebody could sit outside and eat? Or,
Well, let's back up to the original question was, if you're gonna have outdoor dining and it's in the front and you wanted to activate the street, then are there other requirements governing how that space is designed so that it's actually fulfilling the goal of activating the
Right.
street?
But the original question was about lighting, was like, because it's so dark everywhere here, and
Yeah.
everybody wants it to be dark. But we also want to grow this village center and have this streetscape, which we don't currently have.
Yeah,
And so how do you have that? Or do we need to think about that now suddenly people who live in that area are gonna have less of a night sky? Potentially,
which is very important.
which is really important to a very rural area. And then, but then that also feeds into other things beyond lighting, like what you're talking about, fencing, tables. Could be picnic table for the for the business doesn't have to be a restaurant, I guess.
So
Then it's not for dining.
Right,
for multiple uses, yeah. So like this, so this has the context of dining, entertainment, music, drinking establishments. And so, so it has, it has more uses. Some of the uses have more volume, associated with them. Having fencing could be a good thing. I do know that, at Joe's Snack Bar, they do have the ability to do entertainment. So they do have bands.
Joe's or Kate's?
Kate's, I'm sorry. Yeah, Kate's. But they have, it's tied through their liquor license, for the entertainment. And, they have to shut down, I think at like 10 o'clock. So there's requirements there, but there's no requirement like, okay, you need to have, fence to help block the sound or things along those
But
lines.
shouldn't there be a requirement that if you're no longer, open for business, that all those party lights need to be turned off?
Right, we started with lights.
Right.
So let's go back to lights.
Yeah.
So I think the key is that you and David, go ahead and figure it out. But what we're saying is no lights that disturb the night sky after a certain hour, as it is in other places. And so if there is any, whether it's outdoor dining or entertainment,
Right,
that it's not lighting up the sky
right.
any differently,
It could be lights that have a
right?
shield that directs the.
Right,
light.
which our current lighting standard requires.
Right, so it should be
Because all the
treated-
lighting assumptions now are like, you're lighting a parking lot, you're lighting a building, you're lighting a doorway. For a commercial
But a
enterprise.
string of lights is just bulbs.
Right, so that's where Heidi was saying, well, are you introducing a different thing of a decorative light?
Right, and that's, yeah, and I just wanna make sure, like, what we don't wanna open the door to is, wouldn't it be great to like have a laser light in the sky making a beautiful color,
Right,
right? That's what
Right.
as much as I enjoy them, I'm not sure that it, is
Not
something
your
that.
backyard.
Not in my backyard, well, actually in my backyard, but I wouldn't wanna force anybody else to have.
You're not
It-
sure
it-
if it fills the goals of the town.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
You know I would do it.
okay, we've probably talked about that long enough. All right, the next item around schools and childcare in 5.9, that was Wendy's issue. And I think she was concerned about, what was a permitted use and what was a conditional use. And what was center-based care versus family-based care. I think she wasn't quite sure the table was correct.
I can speak to childcare, so I don't really know what family-based care is.
We have, David provided a definition, and I don't think we need to talk about childcare per se. I think we just need to make sure that the table is correct.
Right, so if we have a definition, you want to have family-based care as a use, then that family-based care needs to be added to the use table.
Right,
And
and he didn't do that?
okay.
Was that her question?
I'm not 100% sure. See, the problem is when I was listening to you guys, it was cutting in and out, so I didn't get everything, when I was remote, unfortunately.
Right, I think she wanted to make sure, maybe what it was is that center-based care is in his red line, a conditional use, even though it's in the village center. And she was like, why wouldn't center-based care be permitted in the village center?
Well, why don't we defer to when Wendy's available to clarify, maybe that's the best. So what ends up happening is there's two natures of review for childcare. You can have, the lower level is, you can have up to I believe it's 6 kids, you can actually have them in your house. That would be a home occupation. If you get anything above that, you actually have a separate facility, separate licensing, you need more employees. And it's a higher review for state, which may be more
And I think
the center-based childcare.
I think that's how
Yeah.
the definitions line up with what you just explained. So
Yeah,
can you just look at the red line on the table? And is family-based care in there?
I'm trying to.
That's what I wanted to out the highest list to change.
So, 5.9, I don't think child-based care is, because I was having a difficult time. No, oh, no, it's got center-based childcare preschool.
Right,
And
so
it's
it's
all, it's
center-based in his edit, conditional.
conditional in the village, conditional in the low-density residential, condition in the rural ag, but it's permitted in the commercial, and all the village districts. So it is a permitted use in the village districts.
But
Oh,
not
and-
village center.
It's all, the village district, all the, we've got designations for what used to be the village center district. We now have designations for village center, and then
And it's permitted in all those
it's
village center
permitted in
ones.
all those, yeah.
Oh, no, now I remember. And then I think Wendy was saying, do we really want center-based care where you have a lot of pickup and drop off and all those other things in those other districts?
Yes, you do.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing to have,
Yep. But it's conditional use,
because that would almost disallow it in a neighborhood. where
right?
Your neighbors would be coming in and dropping.
Right, so,
Right.
so,
Or
condi-
even maybe one.
Or even more. Well,
Okay,
that's not, then you're not worried about it.
so I think,
all right, so
I think
we'll,
as proposed, I would say what's proposed is good.
well, it seems like what's proposed, the
It's a
planning
conditional use
commission
rather than it should be.
is
a-
comfortable with.
It's a conditional use in the rural ag. It's a conditional use in the low density residential. And it's a conditional use in the village zoning district. So in the village center and the new three village districts that we're proposing, it's all permitted.
And I would argue that it should be a permitted use in all those other districts as well.
In all the other districts.
Childcare is
It is, it's,
fundamental
it's an,
role in keeping employees working and
it's
providing
an
for them.
important use, but conditional use doesn't mean it's not allowed. It just means has to go to the DRB, and it means it just has to meet these other standards.
I understand and agree that that's what they do. My point is that if you are a aspiring home childcare provider and you don't have a lot of money, which most of them don't,
No, home is a lot, home is
So,
different.
home
We were just
occup-
talking about center base, the
so
big
you're
one.
gonna have 6 kids in your home.
Yeah, anyway,
Yeah, so there's two different varieties of licensing. There's like the lower grade license, which basically applies to home occupation.
Yeah.
Which is an allowed use. It's an allowed use in all the zone districts. And I should back up a little bit. You can have a home occupation, but you can propose that you want to do auto repair. Well, you can do that in your home, but you're gonna have a conditional use review for your home occupation in that nature because of the nature of the use. So, but with regards to the licensing for childcare, it's permitted in all the uses. It's allowed. And what this is saying is, in the higher level, basically, is you turn it to like a preschool where you have to have a number of employees for the number of kids. I think you can, I'm not sure there's really a limit on the number of kids you can have, but we did permit one, just past, the Dollar General. There's a church, heading towards the Jericho market. In the back, they have an annex building that basically this woman started, a preschool, and I think they have 23 to 28 kids that come in there. At that point in time, that did receive a conditional use review. And the primary thing was circulation, where's the drop off occurring, where's the
Right.
parking, that type of thing, and getting copies of the natures of the license from the state. Because there's a necessary review for life safety issues for the kids and things like that to make sure that they're appropriate people taking care of them. So, I think, as proposed, between you and the pencils, I'm not sure I really care if it's a conditional use or a permitted use. The only fallback is if you're in the village district, say up near the school here, that's in the village district and somebody wanted to do it. And it was a permitted use, they would come to me, they would walk away with a yellow card. If they met, if I saw that they had parking, they had the licensing from the state and all that sort of stuff in order. Would neighbors be upset that they weren't notified or they didn't pay attention to the yellow Z? Yes, possibly, but that's just the way it is. And so, If you want checks and balances for a larger type facility, then you leave it as a conditional use to have those checks and balances. If you want to encourage those uses and opportunities, then you let the public figure out where they're going to put them. And you let it be a permitted use. So,
Kind of seems the way he drafted it strikes a good balance. The smaller scale is allowed everywhere. The larger scale is permitted in the growth areas and it's conditional use everywhere else.
Right,
And it's allowed everywhere.
And the smaller scale cutoff point is around 6 to 8 kids.
Six.
So I believe it's 6. It's no more than 8, but I believe it's 6. That's all state regulated because you need to be licensed care provider. So they set those requirements. And no permits get issued until they've received their state requirements. You know, we had a person right up here in 15 who had a home occupation for childcare for a number of years.
Okay, dimensions, density, we can scratch the comment because David had suggested an edit.
Well, I disagree with his edit, but I will discuss that at the appropriate time. So I think the comment does stand. And whether you agree or not, I'm a non-voting member.
Right, so, so the comment in black is saying density should be modified to work this particular way. It turns out that that's what David had already done. It didn't need to be addressed. But Chris, so I'm in favor of what David White proposed. Chris Flynn is suggesting that he's not in favor of what David White proposed.
Because I mean, we don't need to get into.
Right, I actually think it's kind of late and it's kind of a meaty topic.
I would like to defer, I have to confess, I'm
Yeah.
starting to fade.
Yep, okay.
Have some more vitamin water.
So maybe
It's not
should we,
doing anything for me. I know, I thought like,
Start eating cookies now.
I was
Right.
thinking about like, I looked at the caffeine and I thought, no, I can't have caffeine at 7 o'clock at night, so I went with this and it's insufficient.
all right, so we're almost done, but I think maybe we should stop here, right above dimensions, plus Wendy's sheet, which we didn't look at all, although I think there's an overlap.
There is a bunch.
So maybe clean up the overlap, consolidate the document, get rid of all the stuff we just said we don't need to, that are already addressed, and come back to it next time and finish it up.
Yeah, so what I'll do is I've got a whole bunch of notes here, and then probably what I'll do is on this primary sheet that we worked on, I'll add comments in a different color. You know, based on my notes, and I've missed something, then we can discuss those, or we can push or pull if needed, which will be fine. I can also take Wendy's and put it in a different color, you know, addressed in original, if there's something that
But can we
stands
take
out.
Wendy's comments and just combine it all into one document, so that we have one document to work with?
That's fine.
And eliminate anything that's redundant.
Yes.
And I think we can eliminate anything that is already been addressed or is no longer like I have a lot of stuff crossed out, like doesn't apply, get rid of it.
Right.
Which I'm happy to.
Yeah, send me your things. I also, any of you commissioners, that haven't, if you feel the need to provide comment, do so sooner than later. That way we can make sure they get integrated. You know, right at this point in time, I would have a certain amount of confidence that, that when we meet on the 15th, we could, you know, be done with batch. We have the ability to be done with batch 2, and move forward. So, which is, you know, that's great. If we need to address things because they've come up, then we still have the potential for the 20th.
Okay, so before we close this topic number 7, the zoning draft, we're kind of jumping a little bit to the next meeting, but it's kind of related. So do you know, Chris, when we're going to receive batch number 3?
Yep, I actually got up this afternoon.
Okay, so
And I'll be distributing
tomorrow. Okay, so then, have you looked at it yet?
No, I haven't seen it.
And is David thinking that he needs to present batch number 3 to us? Or is batch number 3 pretty small? It's mostly chapter 13.
I haven't really looked at it.
All right,
So-
so we won't know yet.
Yeah, so Whitey got his knee replaced. He says he's doing well. And but we didn't discuss much in the way of batch 3 and presentations and things like that.
Okay,
So
so we'll work on that after. Okay, anything else anybody wants to say on the zoning red line for right now? We're basically just saying we're stopping here and we are continuing this discussion at our next meeting.
I'm gonna get you my comments, and I think that'll give us a good base to work with for the next
Okay.
meeting.
Do we have any public comments on what we just discussed? We still have nobody from the public.
SJ was here and then she left, so
Okay.
I hope she, yeah.
Okay, I'm sure we would hear from her. Chris would hear from her directly if she has any comments. Okay.
Who's that? Who was that?
SJ was on for like 25 minutes or more and she signed off.
I thought it wanted us all, so.
Okay, so moving on then from public comment to number 9, report of events. Does any planning commission people have anything to share?
Do we just want to remind ourselves of Saturday's important event?
Yeah, so that's the next one. So all I have to share is that I went to Catherine McMain's organized an all chairs meeting. And Sabina was there for a little bit, and all the chairs of the various town committees, we all chatted. It was on Zoom. The MOPS committee was there, the Bike Ped committee was there. The conservation committee was there, I was there. And some people didn't know each other, which was kind of interesting. And it was basically like, here's what we're working on. Here's what we're thinking about, a little bit of talk about the budget going forward. So I thought it was a good relationship building meeting. There were a few follow-ups that people took, but nothing really of importance. And I think Catherine's gonna try to do it again, at least a couple times a year.
Susan and I are liaisons for the bicycle and pedestrian connectivity committee, and we met with Cody, the chair, and some representatives from Local Motion about a month ago. And subsequently, neither of us were at this meeting, but at their last meeting, they invited the Local Motion rep to be at their meeting. So specifically, we were talking with Local Motion about helping us sort of look at Raceway and how to make it a little more bicycle and pedestrian friendly in light of the fact that it's not paved. So I think we'll have more conversations going forward, but just so you all know, it's kind of happening.
Okay, so then October 5th is the first of the 3 events that are replacing town meeting. Oh, it's really too bad, Chris, that you weren't here before Jericho changed its town meeting. Because it's quite a legacy, town meeting in Vermont. Maybe.
Another piece of Vermont put to bed.
Yeah, it would be fun to go to one sometime, but in any event, the first meeting is October 5th. I think most of us are planning to attend. There's like a 30-minute overview presentation at the beginning. They gave me 5 minutes of that to talk about how the town plan should inform their conversations about the budget. But the first meeting is very high level, aspirational. Our primary message was don't start from scratch. There's actually all the great aspirational stuff already determined, written down in the town plan. And they're gonna have breakout sessions, and they want to use the getting it done list from the town plan as a way to facilitate the breakout sessions. So that's good.
I feel like I should know this, but is it our responsibility or somebody's responsibility to have copies of that?
SJ asked me if I would bring a certain number of copies to that, so I'm gonna bring them.
Great, thank you.
And then we can have a table there, like we do at town meeting, we talked about this before, it seemed like planning commission people wanted to do it. Heidi said you could be at the table until you have to facilitate, but now that's, they're having the tables just before and after, not during the meeting. So I think you'd be able to be there, and I was gonna be there. And I thought we would bring a copy of the town plan, get a couple of printouts of getting it done. Maybe we had a brief printout of the town plan from like a year ago, from like a collection of dated slides that we had at the farmer's market table, and I was thinking about bringing that too. Beautiful. And I think that's probably good enough.
I also still have my QR code for people just signing on to join Jericho, so I'm just gonna pop that down on the table.
Yeah. Okay. We can also bring that, the thing we had at the farmer's market about this project. But should I just said that out loud? I already don't like the idea, is that I don't think we should bog the public down with anything related to anything other than the budget and the town plan. So we can just bring the town plan stuff. Okay, other business. Chris, do you have any other business?
No, the only, no, I don't, and just the only thing I want to make sure we discuss is, basically just, because I'll put together another, draft agenda with regards to for the 15th, and looks like everything that we kind of have on line items would still be consistent, but then it's a matter of, basically the interviews with regards to prospective candidates. And I don't know if, so I'd like to hear from the commission, okay, I think we need 15 minutes or whatever you think you need for time with regards to interviewing the candidates. And is there an order you would like me to ask them to appear?
So we do both the two, right?
Both that day.
Yeah, so far, yes, yeah, and I believe, Linda, who basically has been, taking them, who is the contact person, she's been away, she's gonna be back. Either she's flying in tomorrow or Wednesday, I'm not sure which day, but if there's anything additional, we'll just try to roll them into the 15th as well, so it's done with. But we may be done, that's the latest effort, is that we have the two candidates. I mean, so we had them on, originally we were looking for actually at 7:15, if we want to go with that 7:15. And it's just a matter of what you guys think with regards to how you want to, I'm gonna say limit the time.
Does that get done in an executive session or is that public session?
Public, yeah.
Public, but would we discuss our observations and a recommendation?
That would be
in
afterwards,
executive-
yeah. So
In
that would be-
executive
yeah,
session though?
yeah. Yeah, so that would be after. So traditionally what ends up happening is when there's a vacancy, we advertise for the vacancy. Usually staff, talks with those people, give them the overview of what the commission does, or the body would do. And then basically they're brought into a meeting for the board to meet them. The board, will say thanks. And then the board will basically, say, the luxury is you guys have two candidates for one spot. So there is a discussion as opposed to one-on-one. So that's a great thing. We had that with regards to the DRB. It was very interesting because basically the DRB members, basically said, well, this guy's a younger person. He represents more of a younger populace, in Jericho. We think he should be the, board member and the other person should be the alternate. So, so that was, you'll have whatever discussion you'll have, with regards to the candidate. That candidate will be forwarded to the select board. The select board, will meet, I believe the select board will meet with just that candidate, but I'm not sure if they would meet with both. It may be a recommendation from the board that they should meet with both, and that we have a feeling that this is a stronger candidate or a better fit. But those are things you'll have to determine.
But we will discuss the candidates and whether or not if there's a choice to be made in executive session.
Yeah, you want to do that. Yeah, so it doesn't need to be a public.
Right.
You don't need to hear it publicly.
And then we come out of executive session, we say we come to a decision.
Right, and I would just leave executive session at the end of the meeting.
Yeah, okay.
So it doesn't interrupt the work session, things along those lines.
Okay.
Because you're gonna have an idea, you know, when you say thanks for visiting us.
So I originally thought SJ's the interview would be about 15 minutes. And so if we do 2 interviews in the same meeting, then we're allocating about 30 minutes to that process, plus another 15 for executive session. So our time to finish the zoning will be less, which is probably fine because I don't think we have that much to do.
No, the reality is basically is combining the documents and then providing the comments based on tonight is not gonna take a whole lot of time.
Right,
And so if there needs to be pre-discussion before the work session, that can happen. So basically, we should be able to, you know, blow through it fairly quickly.
and is it typical if there's more than one candidate to have them here at the same time?
Yeah.
And they go right after each other and they hear
Yeah.
each other's?
Yeah.
That's how it was when people applied for the select board interim position. They were all in the room together.
Okay.
When I applied, there was two candidates and 2 openings.
It's
like, welcome.
Right. So,
Pretty simple.
so should we flip a coin to see who should go first, or it doesn't matter, alphabetical order? Or-
Alphabetical's always the safest.
Do we use the last name or the first name?
Yeah,
Wow.
That one you can flip. a-
alphabetical order and
You ladies first, men first, right?
or whatever works for their schedule, and you'll arrange that.
All right, so what I can, so you want, I can say we have 2 slots, one at 7:15, one at 7:30. And basically I'll send it to both of them and say, all right, whoever responds first can pick, the other person as default.
Sure,
Okay, all right.
that's a good way to do it. Okay, so then wrap up and planning for our next meeting. So the 15th, we just basically ran through. It's gonna be like this agenda, 2 interviews, finish batch 2, and then the reason Chris was suggesting we consider October 29th is because November 5th is normally our meeting, that's election day, so if we cancel that meeting, we could, and then also in November is Thanksgiving week, and I'm
It's the
not
last week,
here.
it's the last week in the month though, so it wouldn't.
Oh, right,
affect
so
us.
we wouldn't normally have that, so,
So my recommendation would be is, let's anticipate meeting on the 29th. And we can always make a final decision.
29th,
October. Yeah, and we can always make that final decision, you know, at the 15th if we get everything done. But what it does allow us to do, it allows us to begin the conversation on batch 3
yeah,
cleanly on the 29th. which-
yeah. So would most people be able
I'll
to
be
come?
remote, but I think I can make it.
Okay. And we have an initial feel that we'd have a quorum?
I don't have anything that says I can't be here
I am
at this point.
iffy. I'm on the road,
Right,
and so
maybe.
the question is whether or not
So-
it'll be settled.
Okay, and
Just
Chris?
see.
I can probably be here.
Okay,
So Susan,
Okay, that's fine.
what we can do and shoot for, is, when I distribute the comments and notes, basically, I'll ask the question about the 29th to all the members. And basically, you know, please respond that you're available and not available. And that'll give us an idea on the quorum.
yeah,
It also can play into, and I'll see what the timing is with regards to our meeting on the 15th. And when the select board meet, there may be the ability to basically have a new member by the 29th.
that would be terrific.
Yeah,
Yes,
so.
I like
so
your
we-
thinking.
Yeah, we can look at those dates and dynamics. I mean, the beauty of the candidates is one, they're exposed to the planning commission and its operation, as well as they've been integrated in town operations in multiple levels. So
Right,
it's not somebody who is, you know, fresh off the street.
yeah.
So from that
Okay,
standpoint,
that'd be
the
great.
learning curve is short.
Right, so we at least have enough interest that the 29th could definitely be a possibility. And we might use the 29th with David. And we don't have to come in costume because it's not close enough to Halloween. But if we want to come in costume, we could, right?
That would be an indicator of whether or not I was coming.
As soon as you're coming, I love it, I love your thinking, Chris, right?
Let me just say.
Yes, okay. Executive session, do we need an executive session?
Could be said.
Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Adjourn.
Motion.
Heidi, motion to adjourn, second, it's Sabina, motion to second, vote second to adjourn is Sabina, all those in favor of adjourn, say aye. Aye. Everybody, okay, thank you, Nancy, thank you, Erin, appreciate it,
Good night.
Good night.
good night.